Hello, hello, hello. Great to see you today. Welcome to the Cars and Coffee with Kenny Brown show. I am one of the co-hosts, Cari Southworth, and we have Brad Grissom with us. He's my other friendly co-host. Today we have a very Today we have a very exciting show. We're excited that our friend and very professional photographer, editor, writer is with us today, Steve Turner. Steve Turner is one of the top Mustang writers, photographers, and editors in the industry. You'll probably recognize his name. He's up there at the same level as Jim Campasano and Evan Smith. I mean, Steve is just like top tier, and he has many stories to share with us. And we really want to bring on personalities from the industry, and that's why we're having him. Before we get to him, we're going to share a video from Kenny, and it's a little bit appropriate right now because we're having a workshop coming up on the Klink. And so the Klink is Kenny's innovative new rear suspension module, and Brad is going to be playing a video of that. But the workshop that's coming up to introduce it and to show you a little bit more about it will be August 23rd. It's Tuesday, August 23rd, and we'll try to have a link in the comments where you can register for it. If you don't get the link there, we'll also be having it posted on our Facebook page, so look for it there. But this suspension, Kenny's been working on for years. It's through the patent process. We're just like a week or two away from getting the official patent on it. So we're very excited about this. There's been a few people that have it on their car, and during the workshop, they'll be telling you a little bit about it. It is saving between 6 and 11 seconds per lap. I mean, that is amazing. We never anticipated that. I'm sure Kenny's up in heaven going, woo-hoo, it works. So it fits any rear live axle car. So it can go more than just Mustang. So we're really excited about this product. Without talking any further, Brad, do you want to introduce the show?
Yeah, so we're going to play an overview video that our friend Wes Dunkel did. Let me see if I can make it work here. Okay.
Kenny Brown Performance's new Klink settles the old Panhard bar versus Watts link debate by providing the lateral location benefits of a Watts link with even more grip than a Panhard bar. The result is quicker turn-in, better mid-corner behavior, and more forward bite after the apex. Kenny Brown's Klink is an innovative, technically advanced, zero-roll axle control module that offers the absolute ultimate handling in live axle lateral control. The patent-pending Kenny Brown Klink rear axle control module with its unique asymmetrical Kenny Brown geometry distributes weight on both rear tires all the time for maximum traction by decoupling axle roll from body roll in cornering, helping you get back on the throttle quicker in corners. The Kenny Brown Klink rear control module provides the benefits of both live axle and independent rear suspension in one module and offers the lowest rear roll center on a live axle. The Klink adds more grip, higher mid-corner speeds, and higher corner exit speeds. The result is lower lap times at the track and lightning quick turn-in on your favorite twisty road. The Klink rear axle control module is a simple bolt-on and can be installed with basic hand tools in less than 2 hours. The Klink is precisely manufactured to fit all S197 Mustangs without drilling, cutting, or welding. The Klink features heavy-duty lined rod ends, billet aluminum linkage, heavy-duty pivot bushings, and durable gray powder coating. The Klink bolts to existing provisions on the chassis and axle. The only additional component is the right side axle bracket that is also a 100% bolt-on. Kenny engineers in all the geometry and designs the Klink for a simple bolt-on application to get you up and running quickly and easily. Since each radius rod has a left-handed threaded end, adjusting the lateral axle position and the roll center height is as easy as turning the rods. Even though lined rod ends and bushings precisely locate the axle, there is no increase in noise, vibration, and harshness over a traditional panhard bar. The K-Link brings unparalleled grip, control, and traction to your S197 Mustang. The only thing faster than the installation and setup will be your lap times.
Okay,
So-
there you have it, folks. So that is a really cool suspension. So the video doesn't really do it justice. There's a lot more information to go along with that video. So we encourage everybody to join us for the next Klink Workshop on August 23rd. And we'll be sure to stay tuned because we'll put up a link on how to register for those of you who are interested.
So guess who we have in the audience today? Brian West. Brian was here just yesterday, Thursday, and he dropped off his car. He has a Roush, and he dropped that off. He is heading up for the Woodward Cruise Week and is getting some seats and belts in it and just a whole bunch of other things. He already has the K-Link on the car. What we did is we sold the K-Link, let our Speed Therapy Academy group buy that earlier than I'm sorry, stumbling over words. But anyway, he has the K-Link on his car, loves it, and he is going to be going up to a Roush event at, I believe, Gingerman. So, Brian, it's really good to have you in the audience. It looks like Fred Francher's here. Fred had his car here too. My goodness, and Fred's here every week. He had a whole suspension put on his car as well. And Dylan's from our Speed Therapy Academy. Welcome, Dylan. Good to see you here. Joe Johnson. You've probably seen that name before if you've been familiar with Cars and Coffee. He just turned 85 and he still drives on track. Pretty amazing. Really, really good guy. Let's see if I have anybody else. Bulgaria, we know who that is. Who is from Bulgaria? Brad?
That is Christopher. That's Christopher George. So Christopher is he is another Speed Therapy Academy alumni member. He went through the very first academy that we had, and it's always a pleasure to have Christopher join us. Unfortunately, he missed our last Academy alumni meeting that we had this past Wednesday night, and I'm so bummed that he couldn't join us because I always like to get updates from him in Bulgaria. So I'm happy to have him join us today.
So he's very loyal. He would get up at 2:00 his time to attend the Speed Therapy Academy. And speaking of the Speed Therapy Academy, Kenny put together an academy where he teaches you how to build your car, why you do it, how to set it up, how to tune it for the track or for the street, and just also does some driver coaching in it. It's a 16-week course, and we're going to be doing another workshop in September called Transform Your Driving Experience Workshop, which tells you a little bit more about what the Speed Therapy Academy is all about. So watch out for that. And we also mentioned Wes Dunkel. And Wes Dunkel, if you remember, he was on a few weeks ago. He wrote this book on how to build and modify your 2011-14 Mustang. And he's just full of knowledge. And he has volunteered to give away this book today. So we will be having a drawing at the end. And so stay tuned and you may win this book. If you want this book, you just need to put in the comments your name. And once you put, what should we put, Brad? What name? Mustang book? How's that sound?
Yeah, everybody just type in Mustang book.
Okay, that sounds good. And type your name in and then give us a thumbs up. So it's important you give us a thumbs up, and you will be entered to win this, and we will be giving it away live at the end of the show. And the best part about it, it is autographed. So anyway, we will be getting on. to
And
our
Rory just joined us as well. So good morning, Rory, and thank you for joining from British Columbia.
So we are going to get on to our guest. I'm just thrilled that he's with us. Steve, oops, I'm trying to control this at the same time I'm talking, Brad. You might want to control it. So I'm trying to get Brad off of there. There. So, and then Brad will be popping back on. So Steve is with us today, Steve Turner. Again, he is a writer and photographer extraordinaire. He's been in the business for years, and I'll have him tell you a little bit more about that. But I cannot tell you how happy I am that he's with us. We've known him for years, and we're just so impressed with all the work that he does. So Steve, can you tell us a little bit about how did you get into the Mustang?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for saying so many nice things about me. You're hired as my agent from now on. But I started out like many people. I was just a young enthusiast, and back in the old days, before the internet, all we had was car magazines. So I would religiously read my car magazines just over and over and over again and learn about all these cars and everything. And then while I was in college, I was going to school for journalism and realized that in order to graduate, I needed to do an internship to complete my program. And I was thumbing through Super Ford magazine, and I realized it was quite close to where I was going to school in Orlando. So I just contacted them and asked them if they'd be interested in having an intern. And they had never had one before, but I came down and spoke to them, and they brought me on board for the summer. And the best part was that, I expected to be doing the work for free, and they ended up paying me a little bit. So I got to do sort of my dream job and get paid and complete college all at the same time. And it was a pretty neat experience, coming from being on the outside, just reading these magazines, so often, and then being on the inside and seeing how they were put together and everything. It was really fascinating. But at the time, I had assumed that was like my one, fun summer doing that sort of work, and I might never get to do it again. But as I completed my degree at the University of Central Florida, one day the phone rang, and Tom Wilson, editor of Super Ford magazine, offered me a job. And so I was able to go right out of college into working for Super Ford magazine. So it was pretty awesome the way it worked out. They say you make your own luck. So that one little contact to try to get an internship really turned into at this point a pretty long career.
That is awesome. I mean, what an opportunity. I have a question for you, though, and
Sure.
This is a cringe question, possibly. So have you always loved Mustangs, or did you grow to love them after joining the Super Ford?
Oh, no, it was definitely Mustangs from the get-go. My dad had I think it was a 73, and that was my first experience where he downshifted and passed this semi going down a hill. We were going super fast, and that was when it clicked that, oh, this is fun, this is cool, I really like this. And then years later, as I started to approach driving age, that was sort of the middle of the Fox Mustang fever, and I fell in love with the 82 Mustang GT. Was the car that was like my dream car when I was in middle school. So that's what got me into reading the magazines and just following all that stuff along, and got me to where I am now. So yeah, it was always Mustangs from the get-go. I've of course grown to appreciate other stuff later in life, but it's Mustangs are at the core for me.
So do you remember the first time you met Kenny, or?
I do. I think the first time we met is when I came up there. It was probably about 1995, and you guys had a driving school event at Putnam Park with your new model at the time, which was a red SN95 Mustang.
The Red Rocket.
Yes. And, I had not been doing this I started interned in 1993 and I started working in 1994. So it was probably late 94 or early 95 or something like that. It was one of the first assignments, where I went out into the field for the magazine. So it was a pretty big deal for me. And, I had obviously driven cars fast on the street and all that, but it was really my first experience on the road course. And, of course, it was a heck of a lot of fun. Just like, I had just been doing it very shortly. So it was like, oh, this is my job. I get to come out and, drive cars fast and everything. And of course, I didn't really know what I was doing or anything. So Kenny was very patient about, showing me, the ins and outs. And that was a foundation that I built on for a long time because I, eventually got put into all sorts of situations where I was driving very fast cars on road courses. So, and I never really had any formal training until I went to the Bondurant school a few years later. But, you kind of pick it up as you go along. So it was a great time. And when I was there, I got this from you, I believe.
Oops. Let's see. Oh, you still have that.
Yes.
Oh, that is
little gift. I thought this was appropriate to bring out for Kenny Brown Cars and Coffee, a Kenny Brown coffee cup with my name on it. So I'm still honored to have that. And so yeah, that was from that trip. And of course Kenny was great, and we would do stuff together for many years. I think the last time I saw you guys when he was with us was at the SEMA show in 2019. I think we spent some time chatting. So
yeah, probably we run into you all the time. It seems like the automotive industry is a huge, multi-billion-dollar industry, but it's actually a very cottage industry. And so many people from so many companies and everything. We all become very good friends. Speaking of that cup, I still have mine, and I have it with my married name. So my previous name was Carrie Kelly.
Yeah.
So Carrie Kelly Kenny Brown cup.
That's highly collectible.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of back in the cupboard, but yeah, I do have one. That's a fun memory. I'm going to bring Brad on to ask you a couple of questions as well. Brad, I'm going to add you back to the stream. And you're on mute, Brad. So
I just saw Brad at Mustangs at Daytona a few weeks ago, and we ran into a pretty interesting Kenny Brown car while we were there.
Yeah, the Kenny Brown quarter horse. It was a yellow car that we built for a gentleman named Lynn Phileas, who was a truck driver, lives near Ocala, I guess, Central Florida. And he walked in one day and he knew exactly what he wanted, and he put his money down right that minute, no questions asked. And we built a car for him. It was a yellow Mustang GTS, and a lot of people didn't know about the GTS at the time. It was pretty stripped down, had roll down windows, was sort of a lighter weight version of the car. And I don't know that they were uber popular. The dealer that we were working with in Indianapolis, Chuck Callahan Ford, had 4 or 5 of them on his lot, and I don't think he could give them away, but he was a hot rodder. And he and Kenny got together and had a meeting of the minds, so to speak, and they decided to turn these cars into hot rod dealer financeable Mustangs, and they were an instant hit, and they took off. And I think one of the first articles that was ever written about those cars was in 50 Mustang and Super Ford's magazine, and I don't know who the editor at the time was.
I'm pretty sure that was me, and I think Dale Amy did the story for us back then.
Yeah, so it probably was Dale, but those were exciting times. And I got to tell you, when I saw that car sitting in the parking lot at Destination Daytona, which is the big Harley Davidson dealership compound that we have here in Ormond Beach, I completely lost it. It just brought back so many memories. And it's amazing because the car, as you saw, Steve, is in pristine condition, just like the day it pretty much rolled off the dealer lot and out of Kenny Brown's facility. So that was a really special treat, I think, for all of us. I know it brought back some memories for you, Steve, as well as a lot of memories for me.
Yeah, it was crazy that it was in such great shape. It was a real time capsule. But
Yeah.
I didn't mean to get us off track. If you have some questions for me, but that was it was cool that we ran into each other and saw an old Kenny Brown car.
Yeah, and we saw our old buddy Mike Acosta too.
Yes.
Miguel Acosta, I guess is his real name. But Mike was our sales rep. Gosh, back in the 1990s, for several years.
He had a big run during the magazine heyday. I think he was everyone's sales rep back then.
Yeah, he was, and he was always a pleasure to work with, and it was really cool to see him show up in Daytona Beach with his new GT 500, which is just an awesome car. So that's good times for us to all reunite. You know, it was just like the old days. So anyway, Kenny never yelled at you when you were in the car because you did something wrong, right?
I think he was pretty nice to me. I think he knew that I really didn't know what the heck I was doing that first time. So I think he took it pretty easy on me.
Yeah. Plus, you were a lot more tame, I think, than Evan Smith.
Well, yeah. Evan has what I don't, which is he doesn't have any fear.
Right.
I still have a lot of self-preservation, so that's why he drives a lot faster than I do, because he has no fear built in. So I think you have to have that if you're going to be a race car driver, right? You can't push it to the edge, you know, and do it repeatedly. I think that's why they start them out as little kids, because then they're not really afraid of anything. They put those little kids in go-karts and everything, and you know, build them up to the really fast stuff. But yeah, Kenny was very gentle and gave me some, you know, the basic tips, of course, but good advice. And I didn't crash the car. You know, I never wanted to be that guy, and really enjoyed the experience being out there at Putnam Park and everything. It was all brand new to me at the time. Just being around all of it was really, really a neat experience. And you know, having someone be so friendly and helpful, and you know, building cool cars. You know, I had as I told Cari, I had grown up reading the magazines well before I started working for them, so I was obviously quite familiar with his work and a lot of the other people that were building high performance Mustangs at the time. So it was neat to be around that firsthand.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that if you knew about Kenny Brown cars prior to meeting him, then it was probably just added to your excitement level once you got there and realized that you're like the guy who's going to be driving the car.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, I knew about his cars. I knew about his involvement with the, you know, Celine racing program back in the day and all that. So it was pretty neat to even meet him and then get to drive the car and get some driving tips, you know. And you know, in all the years since that, every time I ran into him, it was always wonderful to see him. He was great.
So I'm sure, you know, obviously you've driven several of Kenny's cars in the past. So I'm just curious to know, of all the Kenny Brown Mustangs you've ever driven, covered in the magazine, do you have any one particular favorite that really stands out?
Well, I never drove it, but as I said, I was always kind of a fan of Old Blue, the Fox car, because I had grown up reading about that, you know, and that's kind of the era I came up in before I started, you know, working in the industry in the 90s. So I always had a soft spot for those cars. But I think the sweet spot for me anyway, for the Kenny Brown cars was the modular era cars. I think he'd really found, you know, the Fox had its limitations. It was a little bit better chassis, and he was able to really work his magic on those cars. And they had the sort of power band that really worked in those environments too. So, you know, the CSR cars that you still offer the packages for and everything. I think that was kind of the sweet spot for me. But it was really neat to see Wes's video on the stuff for the latest cars. You know, it's cool to see that legacy is continuing on.
Yeah. So Kenny, you know, obviously Kenny was probably my greatest mentor, greatest teacher. He taught me really everything about the Mustang business and really the high performance automotive aftermarket. And he was a great teacher and influencer for hundreds or thousands of Mustang enthusiasts out there. Is there any one particular thing that you can think of that you learned from him, or something that really sticks out in your mind?
I think the thing I took away with, when you're a young enthusiast, all you want is like the most power, you want fat, speed, horsepower. That's all you can think about, right? And I think that his emphasis on making the cars handle and have grip and braking, more so than the power. Like the power is great, but you don't need all that necessarily to have fun, especially on a road course. And at that time, and still to this day, my driving skills were limited. So I've always enjoyed a car that has more handling prowess than it does horsepower, because you tend to get yourself in less trouble and you have more fun driving them. And I think that there's also a sort of an elegance to the packages he would put together. They were everything in general was bolt on, fit the cars, and really wasn't a detriment to the drivability of the cars. They were all enhancements, generally easy to install. And I think just that sort of elegance about just having an emphasis on making the cars handle and brake first, which is maybe not as sexy to hear at first, but once you experience it, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I know that we had many customers and over the years, and the general rule of thumb with a lot of these customers, particularly people who didn't understand the Mustang platform very well, all they wanted was a lot of horsepower, and quite frankly, they wanted what they saw in the magazines, which is pure horsepower, go in a straight line, go fast. And he had a really unique philosophy, and Kenny was one of those people who added power last. His 5 rules of thumb were chassis, suspension, wheels, tires, and brakes. And his philosophy was that if you have a strong chassis and you have a good suspension and the right wheels and tires and you had big brakes, then you could really capitalize on the Mustang platform itself. You could make up for some of the inherent deficiencies that Mustangs had from the factory, because they didn't stop very well, they didn't turn very well.
Right.
But had pretty good power, all things considered. So, Kenny's philosophy was to focus on everything that was really not great about the car, solve those issues, and then at the end of the day, you ended up with a great car that was fun to drive and was fast. And Kenny was unique in that, he's a real engineer. I mean, his background was always in professional racing at one level or another, obviously starting out with open wheel cars, and of course, smaller import cars, Datsuns, things like that, Alfa Romeos, small sports cars from Europe. And being an engineer, he really looked at everything that he did with the Mustang primarily from an engineering standpoint, and it was always form following function type of mentality. And he was that one guy that would dig deep inside the suspension geometry, and everything that he made or manufactured and installed on a vehicle was particularly to fix geometry issues or introduce really, really good geometry to a car that had otherwise fairly poor geometry from the factory. And I think that's one of the things that set him apart from everybody else in this industry, is that he was a real race car engineer, and his approach was very much an engineering approach in terms of everything that he did. So he's an interesting guy, and we all learned a lot from him. So
well, that's kind of the beauty of the Mustang, is it, especially back then, was its imperfection. It was a blank canvas for people to offer improvements, and I think that was part of what made it so popular is because people really want to make it their own, you know, and there was so many people out there approaching that, and Kenny was one of them that excelled at doing that, and taking a car that was, you know, had some weaknesses and turning it into a really high performing car.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with that. So, you know, when you were working as an editor for 50 Mustang and Super Fords, and most people know that that magazine was owned by a big, huge, massive automotive enthusiast publishing group, and they
Yes.
sort of they transferred hands multiple times. So you had to change business cards every 3 or 4 years as they got sold upward. You know, I think it started maybe like as Macmillan Argus Publishing back in the
Well,
old.
you know, I started at Dobbs at Super Ford, which was a privately owned company, and that company was sold to Peterson, and 50 was actually part of Peterson Publishing. And so eventually when they wanted to get rid of one of them, they kind of brought the two together as 50 Mustang and Super Fords. By that time it was EMAP or Source Center. I can't remember. There were, as you said, I was changing business cards a lot. So
Yeah.
the Macmillan Argus side was that was a different company, and then there was CSK that had Muscle Mustangs, and I think Macmillan bought CSK, and then one of the other conglomerates bought that, and then they all eventually came under one umbrella. So there was definitely a lot of change during that time, but you know, I had a pretty good run. I was on 50 for about 15 years. So, you know, I consider myself very fortunate that, you know, I was kind of around for the heyday of the Mustang magazines. And it was a great time getting to see all that development and all those cars firsthand. You know, it's somewhat ancient history now, but it's you know, it's always be special to me to have been around that. And you know, I always loved magazines, so it was pretty cool despite all the corporate changes. I'm just glad I was able to survive as long as I did.
Yeah, no, you and several others, and so you know, it's just a testament to the you know, the people who led the company themselves, because they always found good talent and they always managed to do everything they could to keep that talent around. So you know, you and several others, you know, were with the company just what seemed like forever. And I can remember going to the Tampa office. So you know, obviously the publishing company had offices in you know, LA, they had offices in Tampa, you know, offices in other locations, but the Tampa office was always a real treat for me. I was always so excited to go there, because you're going to walk into that building and you're going to see everybody there in one group. You're going to see Steve Turner, and you're going to see Jim Camposano, and you're going to see Evan Smith, and you know, other people that we became long time friends with, Glenn Castle, Steve Bauer, Michael Johnson, Mark Houlihan. You know, these are some people who really contributed a lot to our hobby, and all of them are true enthusiasts and true Mustang guys, and even all the way to the top of the food chain in the office. Everybody there was always super helpful. You know, they welcomed us with open arms, and we spent a lot of time in that Tampa office doing how-to magazine articles, spending money, advertising dollars, talking shop, doing workshops. I mean, those really were great times, and that was such an awesome facility. But there's just so many great people who worked within that group that you had, and it was so sad to see that go away. But you know, when you think you've worked with a lot of great people in publishing, and so I know in my career, you know, Kenny was that one person, that one mentor who really helped and guided me, you know, through life. Really, he was a life coach for me, more as much or more so than he was a business coach. I'm curious as to see, is there any one or two people that you can think of inside that core group that you worked with who really was kind of a mentor to you, that helped you and guided you through, your many years of tenure with the group?
Well, it was definitely Tom Wilson, who was my editor on Super Ford. He's the one that with him, Donald Farr and he are the ones that brought me on as an intern and eventually hired me. But I worked directly under Tom when I was first starting out in the business, and it was early on. It was pretty much a trial by fire. When they brought me on, there was another gentleman, Steve Statham, who was the managing editor, and Tom was the editor, and I was kind of the new kid. And, they were supposed to kind of train me and bring me along easy. And then about 3 months after I started, Steve left and went back to where he was from in Texas. So I immediately got elevated to the managing editor position, and which is sort of a jack of all trades, doing everything from stories to proofing and organizing the structure of the magazine and all that. Within 3 months I was doing that. So it was it was a bit harrowing, but I learned a lot, both about cars and about writing, and just having a passion for the cars from Tom. I still think he's one of the best writers that was in the business. And it's kind of a shame that he's pretty much retired these days, but it was great times working with him, and he really taught me a lot. Sometimes what not to do, but a lot of times what to do.
Yeah. So were you a photographer when you first went to work there, or was that a skill that you had to learn?
That was one of those things I had to learn on the job. I was always more of a writer. I had done some photography stuff in school coming up. Back in the old days, we actually had a lot of neat classes in high school. So I had graphic arts classes where we'd do everything from make t-shirts to layouts to shoot black and white film and develop it ourselves. So I had some experience doing it, but I hadn't done it at the level that was required for magazines. So fortunately there was some people around that I learned. Tom Shaw, who did the muscle car magazine at Dobbs, taught me some stuff early on. And then I had the good fortune of being a lot of times we would hire really talented photographers for the crucial shoots. So I was able to sort of look over their shoulders of Randy Lorenzen and Dale Amy, and see the sort of stuff they were doing, and take some notes. John Thawley, we had some really great photographers that shot for us. So it was that really helped. But I mean, more than anything, it was just the practice of just doing it. And back then, it's so much easier now with digital because you can kind of take a peek and see what you've got. But back then, when you're shooting black and white film or slides, you didn't really know if you had the shot until you brought it back and had it developed. So you had to shoot a lot of extra photos just in case, to make sure you were going to come home with something early on, when you weren't as sure as some of the people that had been doing it for years. So that instance when I said I went out to Putnam Park with you guys, I hadn't really done a lot of that. So it was fun, but terrifying at the same time, because I had to make sure that I came back with something I could use for the story,
Yeah, I remember the old days before digital, and I working with photographers, yourself and Evan, and I'll bring up a name from the past, Johnny Hunkins.
Yes.
Johnny was the probably the most, for the lack of a better term, and excuse my language, he was the most anal photographer that I ever worked with, ever. I mean, it was early mornings to capture the right sunlight, and I was just astonished at how many photos he took. And I would always think to myself, gee whiz, how many photos do you have to take? Because it's just hundreds, constantly snapping the camera, waiting. And I was his little gaffer, and I'm holding this big reflector, and I'm like, what is this that we're doing exactly? And then you would see the end results of the photography sometimes months afterwards, or at least weeks afterwards, and I was just so astonished at the quality of it. Of course, now we have digital, so it's a lot easier to snap a photo and then look at it and see, is this a good photo or is this a bad photo? Back in the old days, we took like 10 bad photos for every one good photo that we got that was usable. So it was just mind-boggling to see all of you guys work and really the artistry behind everything that you did from a photography standpoint. So
yeah. So Steve, what are some of your favorite photo shoots or editorial pieces that you did? Your favorite, like, thought were the best that you wrote and stuff, and also the most memorable, because I'm sure there's some interesting stories there.
Yeah, I would say that the ones I've always enjoyed the most are having the opportunity to drive the new Mustangs first. I've been fortunate enough. I think my luck's probably about run out by now, but I think I've driven since the first press launch I went on was for the 1995 Cobra R, and ever since then, I think I've driven just about every new Mustang before it was introduced. So I love having the opportunity not only to drive the cars, but we're usually afforded the opportunity to talk to the engineers. And I always like to talk to people that are way smarter than I am, and kind of learn about what it took to put those cars together. Because it's really amazing that they, design these cars and they come out running on the other side of an assembly line, kind of the way they wanted them to. So there's a lot that goes on into it. But I would say that along the way, that 95 Cobra R stands out because I went to Charlotte to drive it, and then I had the opportunity to actually drive the car back to Florida. So I spent like a week driving it and did this really involved story on it, quite lengthy for the time, and did some really neat stuff. Like I stopped somewhere in the South to get gas, and it was crazy. I would never consider doing it now, but I let some kid drive it, that was around, asking questions about it, and got his impressions and included it, and took it to cruise nights around here, and no one had seen a car like that. So at that point, so that was pretty neat. But the one that really, one of my favorite cars of all time is the 2000 Cobra R. And just having that opportunity to drive those cars really fast. I mean, really fast, because they promised a big top speed. So of course we had to figure out whether that was legit or not. And those cars were just so raw for the time, and really ahead of their time, because if you think about it, they had, naturally aspirated modular engine that revved to about 7,000 RPM. And that was kind of unheard of. Now we have the modern engines that do that sort of stuff routinely. But, those cars with no radio and a loud exhaust and an engine that, because of its displacement had a little bit of torque, but would rev that high, and the cars would drive that fast, was sort of a groundbreaker. And then, later on, the 03 Cobra really was a milestone vehicle, because over the years people had always just requested for a supercharger, a 6-speed transmission, an independent rear suspension, and this car brought all that stuff together in one package and offered it from the factory. And of course it wasn't perfect, but it was it sort of, I believe, kind of led to all the cars that we've enjoyed since then, the GT500s and all that kind of stuff. The factory supercharging and the 6 speeds, it made those things normal. So a lot of those stand out. And of course, it was great being around the aftermarket stuff like the Kenny Brown cars as well, and getting a chance to speak with Kenny about what went into engineering those products to upgrade the factory cars. But it was always getting the chance to kind of go deeper inside was what I really enjoyed the most.
Yeah, I really I have pretty fond memories of the 2000 Cobra R. You know, when that car came out, there weren't really a lot of people doing anything with them.
Right.
And a lot of people thought the car is about as perfect as it's going to get from the factory because
Right.
it's a factory boy racer race car. And that was a car that Kenny really embraced, and he put a lot of effort into that, and he developed his own track race package for those cars that was just over the top. In fact, there's a couple of people viewing today, Joe Johnson and Brian West. They both had brand new 2000 Cobra R's, and with very few miles on those at all, they brought those cars to Kenny, and we're talking complete front and rear suspension systems, all kinds of upgrades that were done to
brakes, cooling. At one point, Steve, we did a lot of Cobra R's. We had 5 Cobra R's in the shop at one time that we were doing upgrades on. So
yeah, I spoke to Brad at Mustangs at Daytona. We were talking about the Cobra R's a little bit, and I was impressed by how many of those packages you guys actually sold, because they only made 300 of those cars. So, I figured a lot of them were, bubbled away, but it sounds like a lot of them actually got used the way they were intended, and with your parts on them.
Yeah. Well, Joe Johnson and Brian West are in the audience right now, and they were owners of those. And, those are the kind of people that said, we're not going to wrap this up and store it away. We're going to use it, what a car is used for. So they had a lot of fun with their cars.
And they did too. I think Joe Johnson, he arguably had thousands of race miles or track miles on that car, so he didn't at all treat it like it was a collector item. And to him, it was a special car, but it wasn't so special that he couldn't modify the holy heck out of it and beat it to death on the racetrack. He tried to burn it down and everything at one point, but and the car still lives on to this day, and it's in South Florida.
Great.
And so the owner, obviously loves the car. Maybe someday Joe will try to get it back. I don't know. But Joe always says one of the best cars, or the best car that he ever had, was a Kenny Brown 2000 Cobra R Club Sport racer, and I couldn't agree with him more. So, you're still driving a GT500?
I have it. I to be honest, I don't drive it that often. It spends a lot of time in the garage, but I do pull it out and get in the boost every now and again when I'm not sitting behind this keyboard. Since I'm, I do contract and freelance work, so I'm always juggling, different jobs, writing these days, which I'm fortunate to be able to do. But it keeps me busy, So, but I do still have it, and I have an '88 Mustang, and my daily driver is a little Focus ST, which is, still fun, but practical in many ways, having a little hatchback, and being able to throw stuff in. But I do have that GT500.
So you still have a Fox body. That's still, I guess, your favorite era of Mustang is the Fox body?
It is. I mean, all the stuff that since then, there's been so many great cars along the way, and the modern stuff is just incredible. But I think that, much like the way you lock into your favorite music when you're young, I think that there's certain cars that are always going to stick with you. And, since, as I said earlier during the show, that, I really fell in love with the Foxes, starting with the 82 GT, and then just, started following the magazines and getting all excited about what the possibilities to do with these cars, and kind of followed all through that era. Unfortunately, I was too young and didn't get into the industry until that had kind of ended. But of course, those cars still remained viable back then, and still today you see a lot of them being modified and enjoyed. But yeah, it's those cars really, really stuck with me. I tend to like, certain eras of them, and models, not necessarily all of them, but anytime I see a clean Fox, I'm always going to stop and check it out.
Yeah. So I've got another question for you. Since you're a photographer and you shoot hundreds of cars each year, what are 3 to 5, generic basic tips that you can give to people who are novices and hobbyists, who obviously photograph their own car? What are some tips that you can give them for good photography?
Well, they're pretty basic. The good thing is today, as we talked earlier, it's so much easier to get good photos because even, the cameras in your phone are pretty incredible these days. And if you know what you're doing, you can get great shots with those, and social media has inspired people to get that experience of taking a lot of shots to get that right shot for their Instagram. But, as you said, paying attention to the light is very important. If you can get that early morning, late evening light, you don't ever want harsh shadows on the vehicle or the interior or the engine. If you can shoot early or late or in a pinch, you can, if a cloudy day is your friend, most people might think it's a bad time to shoot, but it's actually really good because it's like having a giant light box that softens the light and you don't get those shadows. Obviously, the composition is really important, framing the car in the background. But, since you have digital cameras and phones and everything, you can try a lot of different stuff and just find what works, and then the background is really, really important. You don't want it to be very busy in the background with light poles sticking up behind the car where it looks like it's coming out of the car. You really want a clean background, and you can do, things like in industrial areas and stuff, but you want it to be, you probably want to bring the car out a little from it so that would be blurred in the background somewhat, so it's not distracting from the vehicle. You always want to make the car the star of the shot, not a person off to the side or a tree sticking out or all that. Just really focus on making the car stand out. But like I said, there's if you just go through Instagram and start looking at car pages, there's a lot of people that do great photography these days.
Cool. So those are some great tips. My favorite is always the picture of the car with the telephone pole in the background. Man, they just always appear. It's like, I never saw that telephone pole before, and now it's in every photo.
Right.
But thank goodness we have Photoshop nowadays. So
I was going to say that the editing part of it is I'm old school, so I try to get it as right as I can in the camera, mainly because I'm too lazy to go back and edit it. But the editing end of it is really, for the really high-end photographers, they really elevated that to just as much of an art as taking the shots. What they do with them in the after work really takes the photos to another level.
Well, I'm going to break in here for just a moment, and I'm going to remind everybody that we are giving away right here Wes Dunkel's How to Build and Modify Your 2011 14 Mustang. So all you need to do to win it is put your name in the comment area with the word Mustang book, and then also make sure you like, and then we will drawing a name at the very end of the show. And Steve, you had something that you were going to show me. What do you have sitting on your desk?
Speaking of great photographers, I have Wes's book too. Mine is not autographed. I'll have to get it autographed the next time I see it. And, just to get a personal plug in, I sort of wrote the early...
How to tune and modify? Really? I didn't know that.
It's the predecessor to Wes's book.
Really? Put that up again so we can see it. And where will we purchase that? On Amazon?
Well, you might be able to find it on Amazon. It's sadly out of print these days. And this is the second edition with the SN95 car on it. There's an earlier version also with the Fox on the cover, the first printing of it. But
well, we are going to promote that too, because we just love, you are so technical. I have a feeling that book is worth its weight in gold, and that's what we liked about Wes too, is he's very technical. But working with you over the years, I mean, your writing is phenomenal. So if you don't mind, we'll post that and we'll maybe do a social media post on it. And we'll talk to you a little bit later. So you don't know where you can get it yet? Is it?
I'm sure you can find it used on Amazon, but like I said, it's not in print anymore.
Okay.
But they're out there. Every now and again, I run into someone that has a copy. So.
Oh, that's cool. So, that is awesome.
But Wes's book is great, and he's a fantastic photographer. So speaking of, hopefully he gave you some photo tips when you had him on the show. So.
Well, actually, you are very modest. You are just phenomenal at your art. So let's see. We are gonna. If anybody has any questions for Steve, this is the time to start loading them in the comment area. So if you have questions for Steve, put that in there. Also, we're going to ask just a couple more questions, but really would like to know about what you're doing now and what you see your vision for going forward with the Mustangs.
Yeah, what I say is my sort of day job these days is doing Fastest Streetcar magazine for the NMRA and NMCA. It's basically the membership magazine. And I think of it as sort of a love letter to the racers that put in all their hard work racing. And then, I write about drag cars during the day, and then I freelance for a ton of Ford outlets at night. As I said, I'm always juggling something. So I'm a regular contributor to Mustang Hub, which is, if you're into magazines still, is fantastic, as is Fastest Streetcar. If you still love magazines, you can still get them, and I work on a couple of them. But I also contribute to several of the Ford websites. I just had a story on the Ford Performance site about Mustangs at Daytona, and I contribute to FordMuscle.com as well. And in the past, I've contributed to Hot Rod and those websites as well. So basically, anyone that'll take my scribbling, I'll write for them. But I love writing about cars and hearing people's stories and learning. It's really fascinating how much brain power and passion goes into people making cars go fast.
So is there anything, we've just started this interviewing thing.
Yes.
So is there anything that you would like to add or?
Well, I'm curious. I'd like to ask you about, obviously, sadly, Kenny is no longer with us, but you guys are going on with the company. So I'm curious. It was great seeing that video at the beginning of the show and seeing the parts in action. That was really cool. But can you talk about how you're moving forward with the company and what the plan is?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking that. So what we're doing, I'm Cari, and I'm actually Kenny's business partner, and his long. I've been married to him for years. So this has been a very tough loss for me personally and professionally. But what we're doing is we're continuing on with his legacy. That's what he would have wanted. And what's interesting is he has left like a wonderful team of people that are so knowledgeable. Obviously, we will never be at his level, but he's trained us so well, such as Brad. Brad knows so much about what's going on. Rich does. Wes Dunkel is coming into the group, and he's worked with us for a number of years, testing products and doing some installation work for us. So and our mechanics. So we have a really good team of people. So we decided to continue on. What my role has been in the past is I was running the company, so it's been a fairly smooth transition going forward. We miss his technical advice, his personality, and his direction. But what we're doing right now is we're building Kenny Brown tribute cars, and it's interesting you were talking about the Fox body cars. We are building a Kenny Brown Outlaw tribute car. So we're taking his iconic cars from each generation of Mustang and building a tribute car from that. So that one's coming in a couple months. We also have one in here right now, an S197, and we are building the Kenny Brown GT4 CSR car, which we fondly call Ruby. So this will be Ruby 2.
Right.
And we have another one that I think is lined up for the S550. That will be the GT4 CSR as well. And that's similar to, if you people know our cars by our names, Maryland, you can check those out on the website. And we're introducing this K-Link. This is phenomenal. Kenny worked on this for years. He finally finished it, and he could hardly wait to get the patent on it. And unfortunately, he passed before the patent came out, but we had it filed at that point. Expect it any day now to get the information in the mail. So we're really excited about that. We have a whole bunch of products that we're developing. I mean, it's going forward, and I know he's here in spirit, just helping us out, and so we're not stopping. So
that's awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah,
so,
that's really great to hear. It was very sad to lose him, but I'm very happy you guys are keeping his legacy alive, and doing those tribute cars is really cool. I can't wait to see some of those when you finish them up.
Oh yeah, we'll be getting them out there so people can see them, and we'll keep you involved in that process too, because I know you love those cars. Let's go to some. Brad, are you tracking the questions? Let's go to a few questions here. And also remind you that if you want to win the book, West Uncle's How to Build and Modify Your 2011 to 14 Mustang, please enter your name and the word Mustang book in the comments. Give us a like, and you will be entered to win at the very end of the show, which is momentarily. Let's see what we have for questions. Brad, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me? There seems to be a delay on my end.
Oh, we can hear you.
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Okay.
So let's see. I'm going through some of the questions here. Lots of people. Eric's here. Steve, this is from Rory. He goes, Steve, what was your most favorite Fox picture?
Most favorite Fox picture? Wow. You mean one that I took, or just one that I saw?
Yeah, I think one that you, maybe both. One that you took, and one that you, or maybe your most favorite Fox article you've written too.
Oh, wow. This is the scope is too big, and my memory is too empty at this point.
Hot question. So.
I think I want to say that one of the most iconic Fox photos was from those BF Goodrich ads that had Lydio Icabelli's tropical yellow coupe. That side view shot in the BFG ads were really, really, really iconic. I couldn't narrow down as far as, I've taken probably 10,000 or more shots of Fox Mustangs at this point, so I don't even know if I could single-handedly pick one out.
And then we have another question. I'm not sure if this is for Steve or just a general question. Would a 3-valve fit in an SN95?
I don't see why it would.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could probably do that. That's not the engine of choice per se for a lot of people who are doing modular swaps into older platform cars, but it certainly can be done, because from an architectural standpoint, it's really not that much different from the 4-valve engines. It's all
I think I've seen a car recently that had that swap, and it's not as sexy as a Coyote swap, but it's probably a lot more affordable to get your hands on a 3-valve and swap it in if your 2-valve or push rod's dead. So why not?
Yeah, I do want to mention that Joe Johnson, he chimed in about his 2000 Cobra R that Kenny built for him.
Yes.
He put over 17,000 track miles on that car. And there's Cobra R's that you see sitting in garages that are still quote unquote collector items that probably don't have 17 miles on them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I always found it fascinating with the 60s cars. If they had some sort of racing heritage, they were always worth more. But once we got into the 80s or whatever, this low mileage, untouched thing became the thing to do. And I always thought it was fascinating that more of those cars that were actually out and raced didn't didn't raise their value instead of lower it.
Yeah. So let's see. So far, we only have one person who has actually even entered the contest to get Wes's book. So you guys are making it way too easy for us. And there's still maybe 2 or 3 minutes left if you want to try to get your name in the hat. Otherwise, we know who the winner is.
Well, I think Rory did, and then there was another one at the top that entered right away, Brad. So
I'll let you find
you want
that.
me to sort through that? Okay.
Yeah. And Tony Gagnon is in the audience today, and he says Steve Turner is everywhere. And of course, Steve and I both are great friends with Tony. Tony is a regular on Cars and Coffee. He's also a masterclass instructor for our Speed Therapy Academy that we do each year. And Tony just has been a tremendous help to all of us in the community, and he's been a tremendous help to Kenny, Cari, and I for the last several years. So it's always nice to see him on and supporting us. And obviously, you know Tony very well.
Absolutely. I just saw him up at the NMRA and MCA race in Michigan, and he can't say I'm everywhere because he's everywhere in his RV. He's just all over the country supporting HP tuners these days. And he's a real asset to that company, you know, getting the word out on their products and educating people and doing his thing tuning.
So we did have I'll refer to him as Facebook user because he's obviously on the Kenny Brown Speed Therapy Society group page. Cari, maybe you know how many Kenny Brown Fox Body Outlaw Mustangs were built?
Well, yeah. Well, I just discovered that because we have somebody that just bought an original Kenny Brown Outlaw car, and there was only 9 built back then.
Wow.
And the gentleman that called in, I can't remember his name right now. I should know it, but anyway, only one was built the year that of his car, so he is 1 out of 1 for that year of the Outlaw cars. But yeah, that was Kenny's top of the line car. We built a ton of Super GTs, and there was another car that I can't remember what he called it, but we built tons of those. But the Outlaw was premier, and like the price was way up there. So we built 9 of those, and we love them all. So, and we have a couple other things that are going. Somebody's listening outside of Turn 14 at Road America. So great show, and thanks for putting it together. Let's see, Steve. We also
that might be Dan Neve.
Oh, I bet it is. There's something else to you. Oh, Calvin Goring says he has your book, and he's been since I'm still running a Fox. I'd rather it go to someone that can use it. Oh, he already has that one. But there's somebody in here that has your book. Do you see that, Brad?
Oh yeah, that's Jorge. Jorge has Steve's book. He says, "What an honor! I've had it for many years, and that book is where he first learned about Kenny Brown."
Look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go.
Thank you, Steve.
Of course.
So
yeah, it's interesting. There's been several books that have been written over the years, and all of the authors have been very generous to us and to Kenny as well. And a lot of these old Mustang books you look at, whether it's Fox Body or How to Build an SN95, there's always some reference in there to Kenny Brown. And so it's amazing to see all the support that he's gotten over the years from people that really he considered to be close friends and family members. It's Steve, Kenny always thought the world of you, Steve. He always thought of you and Evan and Campy as part of the family, as opposed to just friends or industry people. You guys were real family to him, and so that means a lot to see you still today supporting the brand and supporting all of our efforts. We really appreciate that.
Of course, yeah. Kenny was wonderful, and it's an honor to hear you say that he felt that way.
Yeah, no, that's that's genuinely how he felt. So And Calvin Goring says that he already has Steve's book. I don't know. You may not remember Calvin, Steve. Calvin came. He was a Mustang enthusiast. He was a Kenny Brown customer. He was living in New York at the time, I think, and he was in between jobs. And he came to Indianapolis, and we knew a lot about him from talking to him over the phone for years. And so he made his way to Indianapolis. He worked for Kenny Brown for a couple of years, I think, before he maybe got homesick and moved back to New York. He's done really well for himself. I think he's living in Connecticut now, but he works for one of the power companies there in New York. And he also, at one time, he lived on Long Island, and there used to be a racetrack there that I think has since closed down. But he was probably one of the last people to ever run a Mustang at that racetrack before they shut it down.
That's pretty cool. Well, thanks to the people that bought my book back in the day. It did sell for quite a number of years, you know. But,
and that's a labor of love too. That's very technical and very tough to write, I would guess. It takes a lot.
Yeah,
of time.
it was made easier because when I worked at Dobbs, they allowed me to use some of the photos and such that I collected during, you know, my daily duties. So I didn't have to go out and completely reinvent the wheel, but those books are a lot of work. I mean, I hats off to Wes, because his book is really good, and it just takes a lot of time to put them together. I remember I basically wrote that book on my coffee table in my little duplex when I had first started working at Super Ford. So I spent, you know, the better part of weekends for a year putting that thing together, and you know, it turned out pretty well. And they've obviously gone on to continue that series, and you know, I think Wes has kind of done the same thing, using a lot of the stories that he's done on his cars to put those books together. But they, you know, just like putting a magazine together, there's a lot of moving parts that you have to put together, and then you got to go back and edit it and, you know, make sure everything's good. But it's definitely an achievement that I'm proud of.
Yeah,
So, so I'm going to have you choose the number 1 or the number 2, Steve. We have 2 people that entered, so let me know who the winner is.
Let's go with number 1.
Number 1, Rory won. He was the first one to enter. Rory, you will win this magazine. If you can instant message me, I think we're connected online, and we'll get this sent out to you. I think you've ordered stuff from us too, so we'll definitely get this sent out to you this week. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that.
Of course.
Yeah, and we are, again, I wanted to remind everybody about the Klink Workshop. It will be August 23rd. We'll be having links. We're not even far enough. We don't even have all the pages together yet, but I think on Monday you will see a link to register, so make sure you register for that. We'll be talking about it in Cars and Coffee for the next couple of weeks as well. So if you have a S197 Mustang and you're interested in Kenny's new design for that car, it's just a wonderful design. And Steve, let's see if anybody has any other questions for Steve, and let's give him a warm round of applause.
Hopefully I did okay.
You did great. We'd love to have you again.
I'm honored that you had me to be a part of it. It's always fun to talk to both of you, so whether we're on the internet or in person.
Well, it was great. Again, great having you, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed you. We're getting some comments coming in, how much they enjoyed you and thanking you for this. So again, thank you, and we will see everyone in next week is Kenny's encore presentation, and then the following week we'll be live again. So we'll see you then. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.